The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Shawn Smucker is the author of 3 novels, most recently Light from Distant Stars. But he provides for his large family by helping other people get their books written as a co-writer and a ghostwriter. I invited him on The Habit to talk about his habits of creativity in a very busy household that includes 6 children and 2 parents who are writers. Shawn Smucker, thank you so much for joining me on The Habit today.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, good. So your novel, Light from Distant Stars, comes out in July, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you've got a couple of novels that have already come out.
Yeah, so I had 2 young adult books that came out a couple years ago, about a year apart. The Day the Angels Fell was the first one, and then The Edge of Over There was the second one.
But this one is an adult novel, correct?
Yeah, that's right. This is a standalone adult novel.
Yeah. How was that, making the switch from young adult to adult?
It didn't feel too different. I mean, the YA books that I wrote were a lot of adults enjoyed them. I think it just had more to do with the age of the protagonist than anything else.
Right.
So,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think it would be a mistake to, even in a young adult novel, to write about anything that you weren't interested in yourself, right? I mean, the idea of pitching it lower for
right.
I mean, I write middle grade novels, but there aren't any jokes in there that I don't think are funny. As a grown up,
exactly.
There's nothing that I think.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I say. Here's something I think an 11-year-old would like, but I don't like it that much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't it Madeleine L'Engle who said something like, "If a book is too difficult, then you write it for children." So I think that's true.
Yeah. So you did something interesting when you were working on Light from Distant Stars, and that is you decided to journal through that process, and you were copying or you were following the example of, I should say, Steinbeck, right? Steinbeck did this?
Yeah, he did
Which
it
novel?
twice. He did Journal of a Novel, which was for East of Eden.
Okay.
And then he did another one, which I can't remember what they ended up calling that one, for Grapes of Wrath. But the one I really love is Journal of a Novel. And I thought it was really interesting, how deliberate he seemed to be with those entries, and how it seemed to really set him up for, or he used it as a time to kind of concentrate on what he wanted to accomplish. Sometimes he just wrote about, everyday stuff, but I thought it would be an interesting exercise to try.
So what happened?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I didn't do it for the novel that I'm currently working on and handing in soon, but because it does, it just takes more time.
Sure.
It's sometimes I just want to jump into my writing time and not have to take that extra 20 minutes or whatever. But I do think that it's beneficial, and I'm going to start writing another novel this fall, winter probably, and I'm going to do it again because I did feel like it focused my mind a little more, and it just forced me to think about what I was hoping to accomplish, with each section. So I do think it was good.
So in your journal entry, you would write about, here's what I hope to accomplish today. Like what would a typical journal entry look like? Yeah,
well, a lot of it was I would say about half of the entries were more generic as far as this is what I'm struggling with today. These are maybe what the voices in my head are saying, or this is why it's kind of tough for me to get started. Other days I'd be like, hey, this is why it's going well. And then there would be days where I try to work through an issue, like some sort of character development, or there was a scene that I was having trouble with, and so I kind of tried to write through what my challenges were with that, and it was helpful.
And you ended up making that journal available to readers, is that right?
Yeah, it's about 51 pages. It's in a PDF right now. I'm offering it up as a pre-order bonus. I don't know when this episode will go out, but it's up for a pre-order bonus, and I'll probably eventually stick it on Kindle or something, just as a digital download.
Yeah. So I'm curious, as you were doing that, since now you've invited readers into it. Were you thinking about readers when you were doing that? When you were journaling?
I was. Yeah, actually was, because I had a couple hundred people who had signed on to follow me through the process. So when I say journal entries, it was actually I would type it out and then just shoot it out as an email to the people who had signed up to receive it. So it was, in that way, it was also really encouraging, because every couple of days I'd get a few emails back from people, encouraging me, or just saying that it was an entry that had particularly encouraged them. So it was a nice practice, because it can feel pretty lonely when as you know, when you're kind of charging through the first draft of something and wondering if you're losing your mind, to have other people along.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is a lonesome process, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah, you're right. It can be. I'm kind of an extrovert. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I used to always think I was an introvert, but my wife is a true introvert, and I see the differences between us, and so I think I'm a little bit more towards the middle.
Yeah. So many, so many writers describe themselves as introverts and relish the alone time required to write, but I know you've got, at least I have to be alone to write, but I don't especially like being alone.
Yeah. I get out quite a bit while I'm writing. I try to get to cafes or coffee shops a few times a week. I think I do kind of need to have that sense of other stuff going on, other people around me.
Yeah. So, tell me about, you have a big family, 6 kids.
Yep.
And a busy life. How do you squeeze writing into that life? How do you do that? What's your particular process?
I'm really fortunate, Jonathan. I've got so I make a living as a co-writer and a ghostwriter, and I think that really frees me up as far as schedule and stuff. I work at home. I'm self-employed, and so when it comes to writing my own books, I've made it a practice to just make sure that those are always first. So that's the first thing I work on every day.
Okay.
Because I know that I'll get the contracted stuff done. Like, even if I have to work strange hours or work at night or whatever. But if if it's my own stuff, it just seems like I'm more apt to push that onto the back. So, I do, like I said, I try and work on my own stuff first. I try and do 1,000 words a day when I'm in the middle of a draft. And yeah, my wife is really good about when I'm home, trying to keep space for me. And then she's a writer too, so we've recently been also trying to get her more time to write. So it's kind of a lifestyle that we both committed to, and we both know how important it is to the other.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Wow, that's tough, having two people in the house writing. And when you've got then 6 other people kicking around, knocking stuff over.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bit of a circus sometimes. But our kids, my wife had been homeschooling for a while, but our kids went to public school this past year, so that opened up a whole.
I'm sure. Yeah.
On the one hand, a rigid scheduling, but on the other hand, a little bit of empty space. So. Yeah.
So you devote your mornings to writing. When does your wife squeeze it in?
Well, it was interesting. She recently finished the Kate DiCamillo book. I can't remember which one it was. And at the back in the acknowledgments, Kate mentions that she wrote that book, and her normal practice is to write 200 words a day. And at that rate, she does about a book a year for her age group. And so that was really encouraging for my wife. My wife's name is Miley. That was really encouraging for her. She... I think in the past we had always been trying to figure out how can we clear 2 hours a day or a couple hours here and there.
Yeah.
But when she read that, it's become much more doable for her to be writing consistently, because she just sneaks in some time here or there to get her 200 words in. So that's worked well. But we had a big conversation a couple years ago. Well, maybe it was 18 months ago, where I came back from a trip. I had been in Iraq working on a book, a co-writing project, and I came back, 10 days later, having seen the world and all this adventurous stuff.
Yeah.
And she just kind of looked at me and she was like, "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep holding down the house and not writing." I think she was eyeing up her 40th birthday, and we had kind of fallen into this pattern where I was writing as much as I could at first just to pay the bills, but then more recently with a little bit more margin. And so we had to have some serious conversations about clearing some time for her, and we made some changes. And it's been really good.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to write, you have to say no to some things, and you have to, Netflix is a good place to start saying no.
Exactly. That's true.
So you say so. And by the way, that the Kate DiCamillo, if I'm not mistaken, when she started writing 200 words a day, she was working in a book warehouse and would kind of sneak in her 200 words at work. Does that sound right?
Is that right? No, I didn't know that, but that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I think she doesn't sound like an ideal employee. I think she would read the books part of the time and write part of the time. But on the other hand, aren't we all glad that she didn't give all her energy to being a good book warehouse employee? Because man, she's a treasure.
That's the challenge, isn't it? I mean, I think so many writers, I just wish I could encourage people to figure out how to work that in. I cross paths with a lot of writers in my life, and so many of them are stuck or just feel like they can't find the time. And I kind of wish I could just encourage them to keep looking for the time and make it work, because there's always, I mean, if she could do it 200 words a day, you can write 200 words in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So yeah.
Well, and so your goal is to write 1,000 words a day. What happens if you don't write 1,000 words?
It's okay, but it's when I'm in the first draft, I really want to try and get some momentum going, and I feel like if I'm consistently writing less than that, it just feels like I'm not making enough progress for the time that I want to try and finish first draft in. So, 1,000 words seems optimal, and most of the time I'll do a little more than that, but it's a good goal for me, and I can do it in an amount of time where it leaves me, the rest of the day to work on my projects that I have for other folks.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a minute, but the projects for other folks, because in some ways, I have 6 kids, and I've also done the co-writing, ghostwriting, and
okay. Wow.
For me, the co-writing, ghostwriting was a bigger challenge than having 6 kids. But we'll talk about that in a minute. No, we're gonna move on to co-writing and ghostwriting because I forgot what I was going to ask you about about the. Oh no, I do know what I was going to ask you. 1,000 words a day. How much time do you set aside for those 1,000 words?
Well, I try and have like the morning routine that I do and my 1,000 words finished by between 10 and 11 at the latest.
Okay.
But between 10 and 11, yeah.
So, but your morning routine, when you say 10 or 11, do you mean you're starting at 4 in the morning and give yourself till 11? Or you start at 8 in the morning and give yourself till 11?
Well, during the school year, I do breakfast for the kids. So I'm up at around 6, and between 6 and 7, there's not too much going on. So I try and, journal, read my Bible, read a little bit of creative, some book on creativity or writing. And then by 7, it's pretty much, I'm the short order cook.
Yeah.
And getting everybody out the door. And then my wife kind of takes over usually about 7:30 or so. And then the other part of my morning routine that I added was just some physical movement. I mean, a workout would be great, or a walk, or just something to kind of get out. And while I'm doing that, I listen to a book that I love. I usually only listen to books that I've already read because I lose track when I'm listening to books that I haven't read before. And then I come back from that, and that's when I try and jump right into writing my own stuff for a little while.
Wow. Okay. But we're at what, 8:30 now before you start, and you only give yourself till 10 or 11?
Yeah, 8:30. I can usually write 1,000 words in a couple hours if I'm not too distracted.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love the idea of listening to a book that you've already read. I think the listening to a book is so important to a writer.
Yeah, it's listening to books I've already read has become my sort of way of cheating my way through an MFA. I just feel like I learned so much by listening and paying attention to what talented writers are doing or what they're trying to do. And I love All the Light We Cannot See. I listen to Marilyn Robinson a lot. And it's just picking up little things, and then when I go back to my writing that day, it's kind of like, oh, I should try that. Or I'm like, how can I work this in? Or, what was the dialogue like in that book? And could I maybe learn something from that? So
do you have can you give me a concrete example of something that you heard in the morning and then put into your writing a little while later?
Yeah, just recently I was listening to Great Gatsby, and I was blown away by his use of detail, which for some reason, reading the book, that had never necessarily jumped out at me. But listening to it, I was really impressed by just the smallness of the detail that he used. And so, for the next couple writing sessions, I tried to see, if there was a way I could incorporate that a little bit, not wholesale changing my voice to become Fitzgerald, but just trying to pick up a few things. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that you pay the bills with co-writing, some ghostwriting, probably some rewrite editing and that kind of thing. Tell me, so what are the challenges what are the benefits of that kind of work for doing your own work, and what are the challenges?
Yeah, I think the benefits, at least early on especially, was that it taught me or showed me that I could write a book. Like I could start and finish a book. which isn't really something that I had done a whole lot of in my 20s and early 30s. But I'm 42 now. So when I started doing that, I was about 32, 33. And, I just got into this good habit of writing entire books of 50, 60,000 words. Yeah. And I think that was something that served me really well. I think it was also just the sheer amount of words I was writing, even though they were often from dictated recordings or, things like that. Just the physical writing of all those words, I think, started to imprint something in me that was really valuable. But the challenges for sure are, you only have so much output in a day, and it's one of the reasons I do my own stuff first. But even then, sometimes I get to a point where I have to really crank out somebody else's book, and my stuff does get pushed to the side because after doing, I might do 1,500 words for one project and maybe 1,500 for another. And, by the time I get to the afternoon on a day like that, my brain is pretty much fried. So there is that challenge of trying to balance everything.
Yeah. I always found it hard to do both. To write my own stuff and write other people's stuff in the same day. And usually would do one day of my stuff and one day of somebody else's was kind of my pattern for that. But I love your idea, what you mentioned of just that is a relatively low stakes way to show yourself that you can write a book. You're not feeling like this book is represents my self and my identity.
Exactly.
It is a lot easier. I found it much easier to help somebody else put their ideas into words than to put my own into words. And you make a great point when you say just the fact that you could show yourself that you could do it. That this is, yes, there is something mysterious about the process of writing a book, but it's not all mysterious, right? There are skills, there are habits that are in our control, and then if you put those habits in place, you make room for that mystery to assert itself.
Yes, definitely. I think that's a beautiful way of saying it, and I think the other thing was the whole routine of like you're saying, just the practical aspect. I learned to love spreadsheets of saying, okay, well, when does this book need to be finished by? How many writing days do I have between now and then? Okay, I have to do 700 words a day. I have to do 500 words a day. I have to do 1,000 words a day, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And to just, to see, wow, like I can write a whole book, in 3 or 4 months. If that's, it's all about consistency. You can, like with Kate DiCamillo, you can write a whole book in a year on just 200 words a day, but it's the consistency that counts. Yeah.
The other great thing about co-writing, ghostwriting is that you don't have any choice but to try out some different voices.
Yeah.
Which is really helpful for a fiction writer.
Yeah, that's really true. I've written for so many different types of people, and almost all those books were in first person. So that's really true. I don't think I ever actually thought of that before.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to make a living. And my favorite times in that line of work was when I had somebody who really had something good to say and for whatever reason couldn't get it into words. It was a real pleasure and a blessing to help those people get there. So
true.
Words.
So true. I love working with. You can just tell when you're working with someone who's a natural storyteller but not a natural writer.
Yeah.
And those are definitely the most fun.
Yeah. You probably know of David Pallison of the CCEF, the counselor there outside Philly, not too far from where you are in Lancaster.
Oh, okay.
Over by where Westminster Seminary is, there's a CCEF is the counseling organization. Anyway, David Pallison was a very well-known counselor who had a huge impact on just a lot of people. And I was fortunate to get to help him with a book. And he was just so smart and so insightful and so wise. And when you would sit down and talk to him, he would just talk in these beautiful paragraphs. And then when he would try to write it down, it would, it wasn't as beautiful. And I would have to, I would say, so what were you trying to say in this paragraph? And then he would just open his mouth and this amazing paragraph would come out. And I'd be like, well, why didn't you just write what you just said? And I don't know. I couldn't in a million years talk as eloquently as he could talk.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for some reason, when he was actually not it's not that he was a bad writer. He was actually a good writer, but his spoken paragraphs were just so amazing to me. And there was just a difference between that and what made it onto the page. And that's not really all that uncommon.
Yeah, it's co-writing sometimes, and ghostwriting especially, sometimes gets a little flack. And I understand the frustration sometimes because, a lot of times it's just about platform and just about trying to shoehorn a name onto a book cover, so you can sell a lot of books or whatever. Mm-hmm. But there are many, many cases when I'm working with people like you've described where they really do have something remarkable to say. They've got an incredible story to tell.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really worthy partnership when you can help that come into being.
Yeah. I've also helped I've helped people put books in the world that I'm not sure the world needed. You got to put food on the table, man.
I know.
C-list celebrity memoirs, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
But it really feels like good work when there's somebody who really has something to say and just needs a little help saying it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I want to hear a little bit. I know just from reading around on your blog a little bit that you have creative kids. At least a couple of creative kids. Maybe you have 6 creative kids. I don't know. But what do you do to support them in their creative work and help them to develop as sub-creators?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our oldest son is a writer. He's loved to read books ever since he was little. And I think one of the things that we started to do with him a couple years ago, he just turned 16, but I would say when he was about 12 or 13, we kind of just stepped out of the way as far as the books that he wanted to read. I mean, we were still involved in helping him to choose those. And I think what we tended to do was to steer him more into adult books as opposed to YA. I just find YA is actually a lot edgier. Mainstream YA, I feel, is a lot edgier even than a lot of adult fiction. But so we kind of steered him into classics and to older books. And if he wanted to read something and we were kind of like a toss up on it, then we let him read it. And I think just giving him that freedom caused that love to just flourish in him for the written word and for writing. And so I think with him, it was just kind of about us getting out of the way. My daughter loves to play guitar. She's a wonderful guitar player. She's 14 now. And so again, just trying to figure out what tools we could line her up with, what other people could we put her in contact with. I think when you have artistic kids, I don't know if it's cause or effect, but we've always tried to really verbalize the value that we have when it comes to art, whether it's, music or books or things like that. And so talking about those things a lot and just showing the kids how important we feel that they are, I think has kind of ingrained in them a certain sense of wonder and curiosity. So yeah, it's been really fun to see that happening. And most of our kids love to read. We still have 2 real little ones who are 2 and 4, so they're not there yet. But even with them, like my 4-year-old, we were reading Charlotte's Web to them for a period of time, and wow, what an experience! I mean, he loved it. He absolutely loved it.
Really?
So we got to the second to last chapter when Charlotte dies, and I was like getting right up to that. Yeah, I know. I was getting right up to that point. And he suddenly reached over and tried to close the book, and he was like, "Okay, I'm done. I want to go to bed." And I was like, "Well, we're almost finished. We're literally a page away from finishing this chapter, and it'd be great if we could finish." And he wasn't too sure about it, but I just kind of powered through, and boy, he lost it when we finished reading that chapter. He just wept.
Oh, poor guy.
So I know, but you know what the funny thing is, as soon as we finished, he wanted to start it over again.
Wow.
So I think a lot of times we tend to sort of dumb down the stuff that we give our kids. And when I say we, I mean the culture.
Uh-huh.
But I think that they can handle a lot more than we think they can. And I think that, you know, introducing them to this kind of stuff, and I think it just increases their interest and their natural curiosity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it feels like our culture is rushing our little kids to be 15, and then it leaves them there. You know,
that's a great, yes,
15
so
years.
True. That's so true.
On your blog, though, you told a story about your daughter who started a painting and actually made some progress on the painting. And can you tell that story?
Yeah. So she had this idea for a painting for a long time, and she had described it in great detail to us. And it being the picture of a young girl walking into a forest, and all around the girl would be like fairy lights, you know. And so she had this great vision for what she wanted this painting to be. And she paints and draws a lot. She's very talented. So she started on this. This was maybe a year ago or so. I guess she was 12 or 13. And she started in on it. And, you know, throughout the day, we would kind of check on her progress. I don't know. I guess, well, the kids were all homeschooled, so it must have been a day that they were all at home. And so we kind of peek in every now and again, and I just loved how it was turning out. I thought it was really well done. And so I took a picture of it at one point, and then, at night, we walked in, or she came out, I can't remember what happened, but she said, yeah, I painted over it. I was like, what? She was just so frustrated. You know, she couldn't get it to look how she wanted it to look.
Yeah.
And so she painted over it, and I didn't really know what to think of that, because I mean, boy, I get it. There are books that I've written that I would love to just hit the delete key on, but I also think it's important to recognize and almost even bear witness to the improvement that we've made, you know, how far we've come. And so we talked a little bit with her about that. We didn't make a huge deal about it, but I just encouraged her to finish the projects that she starts, and then, you know, if she wants to improve it, to start again and do something, to give it another try. Yeah. But it definitely got my mind thinking about this whole idea of what do we delete and what do we keep.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of going ahead and finishing. And if you then finish it and you want to put it in a drawer and not show anybody, okay. But finishing is pretty important. Just
Jonathan, finishing. I have to jump in here because finishing totally changed my whole writing journey. In 2013, 2014, I had started so many novels in my life leading up to that point. But I don't know that I had ever written a full-length novel from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And in 2014, I decided I was going to do that. I was going to finish the novel I was working on, and that was The Day the Angels Fell, and I self-published it, and then eventually it was picked up by a publisher. But just making that commitment to finishing things, I think, is so important. So important.
That, yes, agreed. Just demonstrated to yourself that you can do this, and even if you do it badly, that's fine too.
Yeah.
All right. And the other thing that you did with your daughter, I remember from your blog post, is that you sat her down and showed her that Ira Glass video in which he talks about the gap. Yes. And I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes for this episode, because probably a lot of listeners already know that, you know, that little short talk by Ira Glass, but it's so good. You know, the idea that the reason you get into this in creative work in the first place is because you have good taste, and your taste, more or less by definition, exceeds your ability when you're, probably at any point in your life. And
I mean, I still feel that gap. I'm sure you probably do too. It's like there's, you know, you read this just amazing stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
And it's easy to sometimes think, oh my gosh, will I ever get to that point? But, Yeah. No,
But
it's such a great video.
That feeling of that gap that you feel, which feels like is what is disqualifying you, in some ways is what's qualifying you as a creative person. Because if you weren't sensitive to that gap and that difference, you wouldn't do it at all. You wouldn't be interested in trying.
Very true.
So, like I said, I'll link to that because I love that you brought that up in your little blog post. All right, last question, Shawn. Who are the writers who make you want to write?
Well, I've mentioned a couple of them, I think, already. Marilyn Robinson, for sure. Whenever, I've reread Gilead many times, read Home many times, and there's just something about the way that she can generate the insides of these characters, the internal movement and stuff. It just amazes me. So whenever I read her stuff, it's like I have to get started. And Anthony Doerr, All the Light We Cannot See. I read that. I feel like I'm always just getting back into that again because I love what he did there, and I'm still trying to figure out how that whole book works so well. But
I haven't read that book. Somehow I've missed that book. Everybody I know who's ever read it has loved it, and I've never read it.
Yeah, highly recommend it. I mean, it's just the way he sets everything up is really beautiful. Some people don't really like the ending, but the more times I read it, the more I'm convinced that it was the right way to go. But you can let me know what you think.
Yeah. Is the narrator a blind person in that story?
Well, it's third person.
It is, okay.
But it's pretty limited. So you get that. Yeah, you do get that feeling that you're in there. And there's a little girl who's a blind girl.
Yeah, I want to. I really want to have a look at that because the visual sense is so important. In my teaching, I just hammer the visual. And here's somebody who wrote this book that everybody loves. From the point of view of somebody who can't see. I want to know. And
he did such a fascinating. I mean, it was a beautiful job too, because especially now that I'm listening through his book again, or the last time I did anyway, I just kept listening every time that he would be in her perspective. I kept listening for, things that he would give away that she couldn't possibly see, and he just didn't do it. I mean, he was so good at it.
Yeah. Well, okay, you've talked me into it. I'm going to go read it. I think the book is at my house somewhere. Of course, finding it's another thing altogether.
Right.
Well, Shawn, thank you so much for taking this time. I hope a lot of people read Light from Distant. Is it Light from Distant Stars or The Light from Distant Stars?
It's Light.
Yeah,
from
that's what I
Distant
thought.
Stars.
Okay, yeah, Light from Distant Stars from Ravel.
Yep.
All right. Well, I hope lots of people read it and enjoy it. And thank you so much for taking this much time with me.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. It was great.
Thanks, Shawn. Let's talk again soon.
The Rabbit Room has partnered with Lipscomb University to make this podcast possible. Lipscomb has graciously given us access to their recording studio and the Center for Entertainment and Arts building. We're so grateful for their sponsorship, their encouragement, and the good work they do in Nashville. Special shout out as well to the Arcadian Wild for allowing us to use their delightful song Finch in the Pantry as part of this podcast. Check out their album of the same name for more excellent music.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
This podcast was produced by The Rabbit Room, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to fostering Christ-centered community and spiritual formation through music, story, and art. All our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.